Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Sweet Nothings podcast. If you're new here, my name is Kelly, here to whisper sweet nothings in your ear. This is your home of relaxed, funny, and informative chats all about the love of eating. We'll talk about the latest food trends, controversial opinions, and all things edible. Sweet, savoury, and all things in between and out with. We join each other today in what has quickly become winter. We are hurtling towards the festive season faster than I think any of us is particularly happy about. And so, of course, it is only natural that that will be a recurring theme in the food news and food trends of this month. But other than that, today I want to get into a bit of discussion about intuitive eating. Now, it's a little bit of a not so much a taboo subject. It's a subject I think not everyone fully understands, or something that not everyone is able to or willing to fully embrace depending on their lifestyle. And it's something I just want to talk about a little bit more in depth, as we've touched upon it here on the podcast before, on my YouTube channel at Maverick Baking before. And it's something I want to get into, both my own opinion and experiences with it, and of course those of the lovely folks listening today and the lovely folks who gave me their responses on Instagram and on YouTube, for which, as always, I am incredibly grateful. This podcast would literally be quite nothing without you. So, before we get into slightly more kind of meaty discussions of intuitive eating, let's touch upon some of the absolute absurdities of food trends and just entertaining things that have occurred on the internet in terms of food this month of November 2022. The first and most hilarious has to be my queen, our queen, Nigella Lawson's peanut butter pasta recipe that set Instagram ablaze, and especially Italian Instagram ablaze. It was nothing more than her cooking what I believe was either spaghetti or linguine with peanut butter, spinach, and then dusting it with smoked paprika. Not enough peanut butter for it to taste peanut buttery, apparently, much like her kind of world famous Marmite spaghetti, but enough peanut butter for it to be salty and savoury, and enough peanut butter to offend an entire section of Southern Europe. I've never tasted it. It looks delicious, and I would trust that woman with my life. So I'm on Team Nigella no matter what happens. But it was a very Jamie Oliver style Italian offense this month that I did enjoy. I think you can probably still find a little recipe video on her Instagram page if you're curious. Similarly, a trend that was quite amusing this month has been people discovering a new way to halve and remove the yolk from a boiled egg. Now, I'm not sure if this is so much something we would do in the UK, but in other parts of the world, such as the US, where deviled eggs are a thing, that being where an egg is hard boiled, the yolks are removed and mashed up with various flavourings and then piped back into the kind of frame of the egg white to create this little appetizer. Very popular, I believe, especially during the festive season around Thanksgiving, etc. And instead of just having said hard-boiled egg with a knife and then scooping out the two halves of the yolk, people have discovered that they can just roll, almost like cutting open an avocado, if you've ever done that, taking a sharp knife and sort of rolling softly the knife through the hard-boiled egg over the yolk without actually cutting the yolk, and it will leave the yolk whole, like a little yellow protein-filled golf ball inside the hard-boiled egg, and just to make removing it easier. Probably not something you'll do every day, but something that plenty of people have been utterly flabbergasted by on TikTok, and that's been quite amusing. And the most shocking, entertaining, and just also tiring thing that I've sort of unearthed on one of my Twitter scrolls just this week, actually, just a couple of days ago, I believe, is the sharing of this sort of multi-millionaires foray into an anti-aging extreme diet, also known in my world as a kind of excess wealth-fueled eating disorder. which is nothing to be laughed at. I just think we should, be honest with ourselves about what this kind of thing is, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. So it was shared by some guy on Twitter that Brian Johnson, a man who sold his company to PayPal for $800 million. I'll repeat that even closer to the microphone for you. That's $800 million, 800 million US dollars in 2013. You can see where, the problems with one's personal sanity would begin after acquiring wealth like that overnight. Since then, instead of, doing what I think all people with that amount of wealth should do, rather than giving it away if they can, is to just disappear into the void and just enjoy their lives in peace. He has instead been investing millions of said dollars to quote unquote reduce aging through the human diet. Now, this isn't the first time we've heard things like this. It's like the people who believe that they can, live forever, or they can reverse cancer, or, things like this just by eating the most obscene and joyless diet possible. It's been going on for a very long time. And this man, Brian Johnson, has supposedly reduced what is known as his epigenetic age by 5.1 years in just 7 months, whatever that means. He's created something called Project Blueprint, which aims to reduce the dieter's biological age in terms of their internal organs. It sounds so much fun. To give you an insight into just what on earth I'm talking about and why this was kind of not only going a little bit viral on Twitter, but as to why I could not resist speaking about this, let me just detail some of the meals on this fountain of youth diet for you, to let you know just how not worth your time it is. So your day will begin with a morning drink known as the Green Giant, containing no sweet corn, I should note. And this is a combination of water, chlorella powder, an amino complex, creatine, collagen peptides, cocoa flavanols, essentially chocolate without any of the fun, cinnamon, and olive oil, followed by dietary supplement pills. One could just drink a smoothie, Anyway, this is shortly followed by breakfast, which is known as the super veggie. Black lentils, broccoli, cauliflower, mushrooms, garlic, ginger, lime, 1 tablespoon of cumin. That's like a curry for 4 people, just for context of people who don't cook with spices a lot, or with cumin particularly. Apple cider vinegar and hemp seeds. Delish, so appetizing. And none of this is in like a sauce ever. The pictures shared on Twitter are just all of these vegetables looking like they've been either steamed or boiled and just laid on a plate together, like a punishment. Lunch will be a nutty pudding. This is almond milk, macadamia nuts, walnuts, flaxseed, half of a Brazil nut. God forbid you go overboard. Cocoa powder, sunflower lecithin, which is like an emulsifier that they use in chocolate, cinnamon, berries, cherries, and pomegranate juice. Again, that sounds like it could be nice, but it's somehow made to look and sound absolutely horrendous. And that's not lunch for a grown man. And dinner then just becomes various examples of combinations of kind of vegetables and nuts served together. And supposedly this will knock 5 years off of your life if you had the time, the budget, and of course the mental fortitude to live like this. And it astounds me how we manage to do this kind of thing for every single generation. Every span of 5 to 10 years has another thing like this that comes out convincing people that this is the way to live, the way to be healthy, and anything otherwise you'll be dead within 2 years. And it's so tiring. There's nothing wrong with living like this if you want to live like this. It's just that it's obviously not sustainable. It's entirely unseasonal. Many parts of the world would not have access to anywhere near this amount of supplements or even the vegetables and other ingredients available. None of these sound particularly warming. in terms of getting yourself through winter, and they just don't sound good. They don't sound good. And I know food is not entirely about tasting good, but it's a lot easier to swallow when it does. So I just thought I would share the nonsense of Mr. Johnson there. More power to him. If he lives to 125, I hope he enjoys himself, but I won't be there to join him. In terms of food news this month, there, of course, have been a couple of ridiculous Christmas releases. It is that time of year. Some people begin celebrating at midnight on Halloween. Some people don't like to celebrate until like 2 days before Christmas. Some people don't celebrate at all for whatever reason. But something that keeps recurring on every social media feed I have is the Marks and Spencer's Panettonut. This is panettone served. I don't believe it's deep fried in the way that a donut is. I could be wrong, but it's served in the shape of a donut and kind of dusted with like cinnamon sugar. But it's a panettone inside. I don't really understand why. Some people are able to do these hybrid foods really, really well. For example, the world famous Dominique Ansel cronut does combine the best parts of a croissant and a donut. But like sometimes putting these two things together just makes both worse than the original. And it doesn't feel particularly Christmassy. Like a donut to me is actually quite a summertime or early autumn kind of thing. It doesn't really fit how you would serve panettone either. But I've certainly seen worse things. And something else that keeps popping up is that Spam have released a figgy pudding flavour of Spam. Now, I personally have no beef with Spam, pardon the meat pun. I grew up in Scotland where on Hogmanay it would be very normal for cubes of Spam to be served on sticks alongside cheese, pickled onion and pineapple. Culture at its finest. I have no issue with Spam. I've eaten it. I've eaten tinned corned beef, etc., etc. Where I take issue is the fact that I thought this was Spam, as in the company, just releasing a figgy pudding for Christmas. Figgy pudding being like a very traditional, old-fashioned, steamed fruit pudding from the UK that I think is also a thing some places in America. But no, it's Spam. It's lunch meat flavoured like a figgy pudding. And I actually feel like I don't need to make any comment on that. I feel like just presenting you with that information is enough. And of course, perhaps the most dramatic and overplayed news in UK food media this month is that Mars and their celebrations, which appear on shelves everywhere at this time of year, some of the celebrations tubs, which contain all of Mars' most, best-selling chocolate mini sweets, some tubs will not contain the iconic Bounty this year. This is marketing of the highest order, of the most desperate, bloodthirsty form. Essentially, they conducted some surveys and supposedly 40% of UK people asked do not like the Bounty. I honestly thought that number would be higher. It's not even so much the coconut flavour of a Bounty. I think it's the texture that puts people off. It's that very chewy, flaky, desiccated coconut texture that really does get stuck in your teeth and is very overpowering compared to all of the other relatively bland sweets within the same tub. And in some Tesco stores, they're going to trial these celebrations tubs with no Bounty in them. Personally, I won't be buying them because I have no beef with the Bounty. And it's sort of become very obvious that while some people are happy about this, some people are outraged about this. This is a real distraction, as one article that was sent to me. I think it was sent to me by someone on Instagram. Thank you again. And it was an article from The Grocer, a website that kind of keeps up to date with product releases and things here in the UK, that this is essentially a very convenient distraction for the fact that Mars products, yet again, have shrunk with prices going up and there being absolutely no increase in quality whatsoever in the ingredients. And also, they've apparently recently been surpassed by Lindt and their Lindor brand as the second biggest selling chocolate brand in the UK. Now, this was the most surprising part of this news for me personally. Lindt Lindor are everywhere. It began as a very kind of, at least marketed as upmarket and luxurious treat, but it's now in supermarkets everywhere. It's now on sale everywhere, especially so at Christmas, because it's a very convenient and decent looking gift to give people. But it now apparently sells more than Mars products do, with Cadbury still kind of holding the throne for British chocolate. This was a surprise for me. Mars have so many products, from obviously the Mars bar to Galaxy chocolate and other things like this. So for it to be surpassed by something that's considered to be a bit more kind of, middle class, if you will, I was a bit surprised by that. But it's been very clear that they've been playing this kind of bounty news up to be like the news of the season, to distract from, falling sales, shrinking products, and increasing prices with no particular change in quality. So let me know your thoughts on that if you have any, though. It's been a bit of spicy news in terms of kind of mainstream chocolate this month. Ever thought about starting your own podcast? Let me tell you about Buzzsprout. Buzzsprout is the easiest and best way to launch, promote, and track your podcast and everything about it. Just record your audio and Buzzsprout will help you do all the rest. Your voice can be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other platforms in literally just a few minutes. I've been using Buzzsprout ever since starting the Sweet Nothings podcast and have never even considered working with any other podcast hosts since. If you want to try podcasting for yourself, just check out the affiliate link in the show notes or the description to get started. But somewhat festive food trends and food news aside, let's get into eating of the intuitive variety. I asked you guys on Instagram and on YouTube if you'd had any experiences with intuitive eating and what you had thought of it in having had those experiences. And thankfully, and very fortunately, you guys had some great responses. Some positive, some negative, some confused. And I want to tell you today, I understand absolutely all of those approaches, basically. Intuitive eating, without wanting to read some kind of, Cambridge Dictionary definition, is the practice of, rather than following dietary plans, rather than following recommendations in terms of macronutrients or your 5 a day, anything like that, or even particular meal times, meal sizes, number of meals. Intuitive eating is essentially the practice of eating what you want, when you want, how you want. Now, the thing that's interesting about it is, to a lot of people, this is not a thing. Like, they've never heard of it, or they don't understand when they find out what it is. They don't understand that everyone just doesn't eat that way, Because some people have a fantastic relationship with food, and their lifestyle and their kind of mental attitude to food and eating really fits with just being able to eat what, where, and how they want. But a lot of people have a kind of barrier to this, whether it is an eating disorder, which I have lots and lots of history with. If this is your first time listening, or you've only listened to a couple of episodes of the podcast, I've spoken recently about guilt around eating in an earlier episode, and I've also shared the story of my childhood eating disorder, which then evolved into a much uglier kind of teenage and adult eating disorder. If you would be interested in those episodes, you can find them on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and also my YouTube channel. But some people, whether it is eating disorder fueled or whether it is simply just unlearning what we've had drilled into us as children in terms of how one should eat, when one should eat, where one should eat, and what one should eat, essentially. Of course, there are dietary requirements in some people's lives. There are religious factors that will impact it. So intuitive eating, though it seems very simple, very basic, very human, very obvious almost, it's something that in the societies we've built, without wanting to sound like that person, within the societies that we've built, that is actually very difficult and quite alien to a lot of people. In terms of your responses, I wanted to read out as many as I can here. I won't be reading out each and every single one, but just to give you an idea of the broad spectrum of kind of experience here. Someone just said, love it. Someone has said it was life-changing. Someone has said their relationship with it is complicated. Someone said, I struggled with an eating disorder for a long time. To learn intuitive eating helped me out of the worst time of my life. Someone else said, I sort of follow it. I don't just eat what I want, I eat what I need. Someone else said that intuitive eating is scary because it feels like being out of control, which they know is wrong. Someone said that intuitive eating for them did not last long. They are too unstable just now, but that they love it and that their younger self ate intuitively, but that unfortunately changed over time. Someone else said that they are currently retrying to eat intuitively after a couple of years and they're finally finding themselves feeling like themselves again. Someone else said it's a nice idea in theory, but useless as a former eating disorder sufferer as it just led to non-stop binge eating. Another said they have an eating disorder, so it was very difficult to adapt to intuitive eating. Someone said that intuitive eating made them gain a lot of weight, but overall very relaxing, so it was much needed. Another said, I have an intuition of a... My personal favourite among these was, I have an intuition of a food insecure Polish peasant living under constant threat of invasion, so no, I didn't try it. My favourite. And someone else in slightly more depth has said that they're trying to follow principles of intuitive eating now. After having an eating disorder, intuitive eating was somewhat too flexible for them, and they needed the support and the rules of a meal plan, as they didn't really have hunger cues or really know what it was that they liked to eat after having those issues. Further down the road of recovery, they find that intuitive eating is really helpful in identifying what they want and to broaden their food horizons, using techniques such as, do I want something crunchy or soft? Do I want something sweet or salty? Has helped them to listen to their cravings rather than sticking rigidly to a meal plan. And it's also helping them to encourage themselves to listen to when they're full, as they find it hard to not just automatically finish their plate full of food, because that is what so many of us are brought up to do. Now, that one I left for last because it is almost a mirror image of my own personal experience with intuitive eating. Thank you again for everyone who put their responses in. Again, I wasn't able to get around to all of them here, but so many of them were similar in their positivity, so many similar in their kind of confusion or not quite having a good relationship with it, and so many said the same not so positive things about it. And yeah, that final kind of comment almost perfectly mirrors my experience, in that coming out of an eating disorder, you really do have no idea what you like anymore. Or at least coming out of certain types of eating disorders. It can be different when you've come out of binge eating disorder, and that can make intuitive eating even harder. It can also be difficult if you're coming out of bulimic tendencies, but if you're coming out of what's now known as orthorexia or out of anorexia, you know, some of these disorders almost teach you to eat and to process the idea of food very robotically in terms of calorie counting or macronutrients, And so learning to actually allow yourself to have certain types of foods is damn near impossible, nor do you even know what you like anymore, because you've kind of conditioned yourself to accept certain types of food, if you will. I found this was the case for me personally when I came out of my adult eating disorder, as I would call it, which was undeniably orthorexia, an obsession with eating only healthy foods or food deemed as healthy. Whether that was overeating said healthy foods, it didn't matter. It's a strange thing, orthorexia. And when I came out of that, I was the same. I had to kind of remind myself whether I liked milk chocolate or whether I could only eat dark chocolate. I had to remind myself whether I could enjoy porridge made with milk and other ingredients instead of just made with water or made with half milk and half water. And these things sound so silly, but, allowing myself to be hungry or even knowing what hunger or subtle hunger felt like, or, was I only allowed to eat when I was so hungry it was painful. When you don't have a good relationship with food in the first place, trying to establish this freedom for yourself is terrifying. Terrifying and difficult because it's like your own brain and body have been conditioned to work against your actual needs in favor of what you think is correct. In the same way that, the military teaches you to handle things differently than a normal person would. It's like you've trained your brain. Um, and that's why something like intuitive eating that sounds so simple is actually so difficult. Even without the consideration of eating disorders, our work schedules, whether you work 9 to 5 in an office and you can't make that flexible, whether you work on a building site, whether you work in a gym, whether you work in a call center, whether you work in any of these places, whether you work in a hospital and you're on shifts, whether you work in retail and you only get a 20-minute break and you only have so many different things around you, our work schedules, family meal times, and even more can dictate what we eat and when we eat more than anything, even if you have a good relationship with food. Also, it's undeniable from your feedback, from my own experience, that memories from your childhood, influence from friends and family members, pressures from work conversations or from social media about weight or eating trends or veganism or gluten-free and things like that influence our decisions all the time. If you've been brought up to always finish your plate, even if you don't want it. If you've been brought up that dinner is at 6 o'clock on the dot, whether you're hungry or not. If you've been brought up that, certain things make you fat and certain things make you feel good, or, you have to finish your main course before you can have pudding, or you have to eat vegetables, whether you like them or not. All of these things just kind of warp your perception of what you actually like, what you want, what you need, and it's very, very difficult and can take a long time to train ourselves out of that almost. Mentally, intuitive eating is not easy, obviously, but I think for a lot of people, not all people, but for a lot of people, once the practice is in place and you're learning, it can be very helpful. We think we know what we need, or we suppress, what we want. And, or, sometimes the opposite. Sometimes we get so excited about a food or an opportunity for a certain food, think maybe the one night a week, get a takeaway, or you have a slice of birthday cake sitting in front of you, that you'll ruin your excitement for that thing by overdoing it. Like you would, when you're hungover after a great night out, you're so excited by being there, being around your friends, or getting a chance to kind of go overboard that you then feel awful either that day or the following day. And that then poisons your brain back into not allowing you or not feeling free to do those things again. Physically, not just mentally, it can be difficult as well. But it can also be very educational, because every body is completely different in terms of what is healthy or unhealthy for some people. Some people physically can't eat some foods because their body will just reject it. In the same way that some people have nut allergies, some people just straight up can't digest certain things, and you only learn that by learning from your own body and taking the time to pay attention to that instead of just rigidly following a meal plan or a suggestion or what other people are cooking for you. For example, I've learned that despite my love of coffee and my adoration for chocolate, that my body does not like caffeine at all. I can have a cup of coffee, but if I have more than that, both my heart and my digestion are a wreck. Whereas I have friends who can drink 3 to 6 cups of coffee in a day and still go to bed and sleep like a baby. Similarly, my body hates fried stuff. Again, I can have small amounts because anything deep fried is delicious, but I know that if I eat it to the extent that it is served up, a whole portion of chips or, a whole portion of onion rings, I will feel physically not good. And it's not even the amount of oil, because I can eat olive oil with no problems. I can eat high fat foods with no problems, but something about the combination of ingredients in most deep fried foods just do not sit well with me. And I've had to learn that physically, in the same way that my body handles dairy a lot better than many other people's body handles it. I can drink milk, eat yogurt, eat ice cream, eat cheese, and dairy has never and does never affect my digestion, my skin, anything I'm feeling. And the same way that bread and me, gluten and me go very well together. In the same way that I've tried to be vegan, but my body was not happy with it. I was breaking out in cold sores. My nails were kind of peeling and flaking because even though I was eating everything that other vegans eat and do well with, my body didn't like it. My Scottish body, that's, the child of years of tatties and turnips down the bloodline, did not do well with not having some red meat or some dairy or some eggs. Some people find porridge extremely filling. I'm hungry 2 hours later. I prefer not feeling hunger pangs, in the sense that I would rather eat smaller things more often than the feeling of being full, which could be an actual physical preference, or it could be a hangover from my eating disorder days, in that I don't like the full to the brim feeling on any other day except Christmas Day, really. And ultimately, in my experience, it's like some days you'll be good, or some days you'll be in tune with your body and able to eat intuitively, and other days you'll be really, really bad at it. Even, months and years down the line. It's something I feel I've been practicing now for about 3 years. And some days I do get it all wrong. Some days I go to bed and I do not feel good because I thought I wanted or needed something and I didn't. I was eating it out of stress, or I was eating it because it was there and I don't want it to go to waste, which is fine. But my body then reminded me, girl, what are we doing? Some days you'll get it all wrong, but some days you'll wonder why you haven't been able to do it all the time, because you feel fantastic. You don't feel starving hungry anymore, but also you don't feel uncomfortably full or bloated because you're not forcing yourself to eat salads or soups or these really high vegetable or fruit intake meals that your body does not like. Or you won't be eating as meat, or you won't be eating as much meat as your family is, for example, because your body does not like it. Or you eat a bit less than your partner does, or a bit less than your siblings do, because they were up to a different level of activity than you that day. And it's not that you're eating less because you haven't done activity, but you're eating less because you just physically haven't really worked up the appetite. So you don't need to eat everything that someone else eats. For those of us with eating disorder tendencies, I think it can take even more time to unlearn all of the weird, deep-seated rules that we create for ourselves. But I don't think it's impossible. For certain types of eating disorder or certain issues, as I touched upon, such as binge eating, I do recognize it can be extremely challenging to have the freedom that intuitive eating allows, and a meal plan or a kind of dietary approach that has been outlined a bit more clearly can be better in terms of what you're able to stick to. But I think for many of us who come from a background of anorexia or orthorexia, or even people who have gone through decades of yo-yo dieting, or just decades of never being happy, or always feeling that they're not doing enough, never being happy with their weight, never feeling kind of energetic enough, I would really encourage to try as far as possible an approach to intuitive eating. Of course, I realize we can't all choose what shifts we're on and when we get our lunch break, what time our families eat dinner, what the kids want to eat that evening. I absolutely understand that all of those things affect our abilities, as well as budget, timing, everything. Absolutely, because I've experienced all of those things myself, But just to take more time to listen to your body before eating. For example, don't eat just because everyone else is eating. Don't eat very little just because everyone else is eating very little. Like if there's cake in the office and everyone else is taking a tiny little slice, but you really like cake, or you just really want something sweet, or you're hungry, don't feel pressured into taking the same size of piece that everyone else is taking. Similarly, if someone's ordered a whole pizza, but you're only hungry for like half a pizza, That's fine. Someone else can enjoy the other half, or you can save it to enjoy later on. And it's very difficult to learn these things, but trying it is the only way we learn. Trying it's the only way we find out, you know? Don't think that you have to eat at the same time as everyone else does. If you genuinely do better eating dinner at 9 p.m. rather than 7, do it. If you enjoy having a big breakfast and smaller meals throughout the day, as I do, try it. If you hate breakfast, don't eat it just because someone's telling you you absolutely need to eat it. Have a bigger lunch or have smaller snacks throughout the morning to keep you going. It totally depends on you. The kind of food, the amount of food, and how you eat said food is down to you. Obviously, do in that time make sure that you're eating enough, and do make sure that you're trying to nourish your body, and paying attention to it doesn't mean punishing it, nor does it mean going crazy. I think a lot of people, when they hear eating what they want when they want, they think that they'll just eat chocolate 24/7. You won't. I promise, because it will not feel good. Or you might do it on day one, and then the intuitive part will kick in and you'll think, oh, well, that was not a good idea because that was expensive and now I feel a little bit nauseous. You know, it's not about throwing out vegetables and only eating delicious deep fried things all the time. It's just about letting yourself have what you want, letting yourself eat the amount that you want, and not being ruled by other people's opinions, experiences, and even traditions, you know, within reason. And I would add to that especially at this time of year, no matter your religion, your background, your traditions, what you do at this time of year, as this festive period comes in, don't feel under pressure to overeat and go crazy. If you want to overeat and go crazy, as I like to do at this time of year, do it if you want to do it. If this is the only time of year you splash out, go for it if you feel okay doing that. But don't feel under pressure to drink more than normal, eat more than normal, or eat different things than normal if you don't actually want to. Just because your family or work colleagues are doing it, you don't have to. The same way that you wouldn't with alcohol, drugs, cigarettes, you don't have to give in to peer pressure. But on the absolute flip side, in January, which will come round even faster, and I hate to be the person that says this because I know it's only November, but in January, when that comes round as the follow-up to the festive period, in the exact same manner, do not feel under pressure to lose weight or to go vegan or to just join a gym or anything like that if you don't want to and if it doesn't feel good. You know, giving into the highly marketed need to overeat at Christmas and then the highly marketed need to lose weight, get the bikini body, and only live on salads, to drop meat, to drop bread, to drop whatever. Those two things go hand in hand for a reason, because they're being sold to you by the diet industry, by companies in general. And as we've seen, surely by now, in experience from our grandparents, parents, aunties, uncles, older siblings, that approach doesn't work. The yo-yoing, the ebbing and flowing of overeating and undereating and binging and punishing oneself is not good nor sustainable. Don't feel pressured to go crazy this Christmas, and don't feel pressured to punish yourself or to go along with the diet conversation that comes in January. And I feel it's even more important to kind of emphasize the benefits of intuition at this time of year. I want to thank you all so much for being honest and being brave to kind of speak up about your own experiences, whether they were positive or not. I can completely understand how, especially at the start, it feels alien, it feels too free, or you were worried because you were gaining weight. And equally, I understand that for some people, it's the best thing they've ever done. It's a way of eating I'll always advocate for, even if I know that it's impossible. I absolutely acknowledge and know that it's impossible for some people. But even if you can only do it for half of your day, even if you can only do it for your day off or a couple of your days off a week, even if you just try and practice it for a little while, it's something I will endlessly recommend if you've never tried it before. It's helped me endlessly in not only learning to love food, but learning to kind of love and look after myself again, and to have a bit more independence, a bit more understanding physically and mentally of the, skin suit that I walk around in. while it may not be the kind of thing that you're happy to follow forever, there's only learning to be done, whether you like it or not, you know. And that's all I really kind of wanted to touch upon today. I didn't want to get too headlong into too much of the nonsense of the trending stuff that's come out in terms of food this month, nor did I want it to be just 100% kind of Christmassy, because I know that that can also be equally exhausting. Thank you again for all your contributions. Thank you, as always, for listening. I hope this episode has either kind of maybe made the concept or the process of intuitive eating a bit more clear, or perhaps it's been interesting to hear other people's perspectives, other people's experiences, and that if it's something you haven't ever tried before, that either you'll consider it or you'll maybe, you'll understand even more clearly that it's not for you. I hope you took something for it. I hope you took kind of something from it ultimately. It's been a pleasure whispering these sweet nothings in your ear again this month. I really appreciate you guys being here, whether again it's on Spotify, on Apple, on other podcast apps, or if you're watching on YouTube. Do, as always, let me know your thoughts on social media. You can find me everywhere at Maverick Baking. Do let me know your thoughts on this subject if you haven't already, on other people's experiences, if you wanted to expand further on your own, or if you had any kind of opinions or feelings you'd like to discuss on mine. I'd be more than happy to talk about this further with anyone individually as well, even if you want to slide into those DMs. But that is what I'm going to wrap up for this month. I hope the winter is treating you as kindly as it can at the moment. I am so cold. I have a hot water bottle stuffed down the front of my trousers at the moment because we're refusing to put the heating on in every room of the flat. So I hope that we're at least united in that kind of tackling the cold together this year. But thank you again. And I hope you have a lovely run up to Christmas or whichever festivity you celebrate. And I will either see you at the end of December or I will see you in 2023. See you for the next one. You're listening to the Sweet Nothings podcast. If you want to support the production, get access to exclusive foodie content and early access to podcast episodes, you can do so via Patreon. Just search for Sweet Nothings or Maverick Baking on Patreon, and thank you for everything.